Daniel, one of the things that struck me, even as you're retelling that, and I've heard a version of your story there before, is the courage, the transition, the stark transition that is to have a long, successful career working for a company to say, I'm going to do my own thing. For you, you said, if not now, when? But like, what was like the internal debate with you? Is like that, like, should I? Were you on the? Was there any struggle around like identity? Well, who am I if I give up this cushy job that I've done so well for so long?
Guaranteed checks
What
are
what what
nice.
was this debate, if any, for you, or what was the tension that you had to manage?
I don't know if it's a debate, but I'd say that I always like to put myself in the shoes of other people. And I realize that there's a better way of going about things. Instead of simply the normal status quo that you have from all the vendors that you talk to, it's like, let's look at this differently, right? Like let's talk about what is normal in a normal environment, right? So you've got your IT leaders and they work with their known vendors, right? Which is probably the small ecosystem, maybe that fit in your hand if you're lucky. And they move from company to company, and then the next company they engage those same vendors over again. The reality is that there's hundreds of different suppliers out there that some of them have really, really good solutions that are best in class. They just don't happen to go to FS Tech. They don't go to Mertech. They don't go to any of these shows out there. And it's my job to help introduce IT leaders to these other companies that they would have never considered before. In most cases, really we can do is we can help improve the support model that they're getting from their customers, help modernize their environment, and realize some cost savings. And by the way, all that work and that heavy lift, we're doing it for the customer. So they don't have to do any of this, right? That's a pretty broad category. There's a lot there. Yeah, we can.
When you're going through the process with your clients, and I'd love to know more about how that works. Is there a form of like here's an audit? We're going to go through the various things that you're currently shelling out dough for, and then look just some initial cost savings analysis, or what's kind of that engagement?
So the audit's the pretty simple first step, right? Let's figure out what do we have today, right? We have a whole process where we try to uncover, number one is what are the customer's goals, right? What are the KPIs they're trying to achieve, operational requirements, limitations, all those things. Like let's figure out what we have today. Okay, and then let's talk about where we want to go, right? And then we work in tandem with the customer to figure out what that plan looks like, right? What's that gap analysis? What are options? And then let's come to a consensus on what makes the most sense for each of these IT leaders, right? As we move forward. That's the
So,
general part. It's that discovery.
and that does. Go ahead.
And then, from beyond that, I mean, it's a matter of documentation, right? It's like let's figure out, let's document what we heard, what's going on, and then that way that there's no surprises, right? Everybody has absolute clarity as to what comes next, and then it's my job to hold everyone accountable to make sure that happens.
Yeah. And I'll be very candid. Before our very first conversation, Daniel, I was not that excited for a conversation, and the reason was because the broader telco category is very commoditized. There's dozens, hundreds of players, and we have a bias towards cool, sexy, cutting edge technologies. Like, what are we doing here? But then when we talked to you, it was a breath of fresh air. It's like, oh, what Daniel's doing is unique. Could you communicate it to us in a way that's like, oh, this could be very, very valuable for brands. And at the end of the day, that's what we care about, right? Is impactful approaches to problems. Break down for us what you do in the way you do that is unique. You hit on one of them, which is the consultative nature of things, and we can relate to the importance of that. But break down how unique your approach is.
So there's the pre-sales process, right? Again, we chatted a little bit about that. Truly understanding what's going on in a customer's environment and what their limitations are and what their goals are. Communication, coming to consensus. But then after that, I go shopping, right? And because leaders out there, buyers out there have a very limited, I call it, span of awareness of not just the solutions that are out there, but also the pricing that's out there. That knowledge base enables me to more successfully negotiate favorable terms for the customer and a lot of different items that people don't consider on their contracts. I have an attorney, that will help with negotiation on contracts that they've been doing contract negotiation forever. And this is like all that we do, right? Making sure that the customer doesn't get locked into something that doesn't really work for them. And then once we come up with that contract, we get to the point where we're talking about deployment. Typically, when someone buys from a supplier, the supplier has their own project management, right? And let's just be honest. I mean, not all project managers are created equal, and not all of them have certifications. Not all of them have gone through the rigor of learning what best in class project
A lot of
management looks
wildlings
like.
out there.
And so what we have independent project management that will project manage the project managers and look at all those little gotchas that might be down the path, right? I can't tell you how often I talk to leaders out there where they say, I didn't get my services delivered on time. What do I do? I'm in trouble. They're deploying Wi-Fi hotspots or 4G, 5G hotspots, because they couldn't get their stuff delivered on time. I mean, I bet you half the people on the podcast are probably nodding in agreement at that. But it's really easy to lay blame on the service provider and say, oh, they didn't get it there on time. It's a lot more difficult to like own it, right? Own the situation and what got us to this point. And sometimes it's like, if I look at a location and it requires construction, did I really understand and dig in to find out what's going to be required in order to deliver service? Did that freeway crossing, had it always been there, or did it just pop up all of a sudden? How about the railroad crossing that someone has to build across that'll take 6 months to construct? It's those sorts of questions and that level of rigor that matters in the process. And most people are not going to look at those things, and that's what we do.
I was thinking about this too, because you're a client of ours too, with transparency, right? And uh, as I was working through some of your materials, I was going, wow, 400 vendors, right, or 400 different suppliers. I'm sorry, your language is suppliers, right? How do you, when you're evaluating that community or that pool, what's your filter for quality? How are you making sure you're getting good stuff out of that? Because that's a lot.
It's a lot. I mean,
Yeah.
you're not going to engage with everyone, obviously, and nobody can be an expert on every single supplier. But I have a wealth of resources, technical resources that are experts in different fields. Like I have resources that are experts on telephony and customer experience. I have experts who can tell me more about, who's best for this. And so I engage all these different resources to try to figure out who should I engage, right? Who should I talk to? And then that's kind of my job. And so I have a community of support to help
Mhm.
guide the process and then
God.
engage with them. And then I dig in, right? That's my job. And then dig in and figure out all those gotchas. I've negotiated, I can't tell you how many contracts over my career. I've been doing this for 28 years now in the telco side. And those contracts, the devil's in the detail and
Well,
understanding what that looks like.
that's for sure. In one follow-up question there, because previously you mentioned something about ownership, right, and being and owning the problems or situations. So with that level of that amount of suppliers, who owns the problem? Because if I'm a customer, I'm like, who owns the problem? Who am I talking to? Is it you, or do I have a direct contact with them? Like, tell me a little bit about the when things aren't so great. Who owns the problems?
So the ultimate business relationship is between the customer and the supplier. But
You're the broker.
I'm sorry, I'm a broker, right? That's my job. But at the same time, my job doesn't end when that service gets handed over. My goal is to become a partner for, into the foreseeable future. I don't want to make any grandiose words here, but um, I want to work with them for as long as I can, right? And my goal is to continue to help them to modernize the environment, making sure they're getting the right support, and then also cost control, cost containment, because it doesn't stop you from right now, because things are going to change in a couple of months or in a couple of
Right.
years. So it's my job to continuously ensure that we're modernizing and optimizing that cost structure and moving forward. But if anything happens, if there's anything that's going on, the thing we are participating on normal QBRs with the customers. We're engaging with the vendors and making sure that if there's anything that's broken or is it anything less than excellent, that we fix that. And if it doesn't work, guess what? I'm not married to a single provider. I can help move people around.
Microservices. Pull it out and put in a different one.
Absolutely. If it makes sense and if the
Right.
pain is big enough, right? Absolutely.
Thanks. That's perfect. That's exactly what I was hoping to hear.
Daniel, one of the joys of my career, and I mean this, is that I get that goes without
Sorry, I
saying,
couldn't help it.
right? Come on. It could sound like a negative to people. That's why I preface it that way, which is getting to talk to people all along a spectrum of technological sophistication. Sometimes, like dealing with CTOs, CIOs who know a heck of a lot more about technology than I do, and I'm having to have them teach me. Another time, I'm talking to somebody, I got to explain what EOS stands for. So, how do you adapt your process to helping a client who may be somewhere very different place along the spectrum of sophistication from a technology perspective?
I think a lot of it is utilization of metaphors, for people to kind of explain what the outcome is, and focusing on the outcome rather than the how so much, right?
Uh-huh.
That's ultimately it, right. It's like, here's kind of what we're going to do, but here's what you can expect, and we focus on those benefits that they're going to experience on that side. And then on the front end, talking to the customer about like their business requirements and what are they trying to solve. I mean, that's really it. It's that simple. Here's what you're trying to solve. Here's a high level what we're going to be doing, and here's what you can expect, and sharing on those details. You modify it. The other thing that helps really well is having really good sales engineering, right? When you get to things that are really sophisticated, and I've got some really, really good sales engineers that support me.
I'm
That
hearing you
helps.
say that focusing on outcomes is a universal language.
Indeed.
The last two shows we were on today, AI was heavily talked about. In addition to or separate from, what trends are you seeing right now when it comes to IT procurement that companies need to be paying attention to? Like if I'm running a business, what I really need to be looking out?
So, God, that's a really broad category. I'll start actually just from the tools. It's something that's
Sure.
kind of germane to a lot of like network is if I've got a brand operator that's got, 250 locations, they're all over the US, what does that decision making process look like? Like, how do you decide who the ultimate like provider you're going to have to buy that connectivity from? And usually people say, well, let's take a look at the price, right? If I'm a reseller that doesn't really care so much, they're going to go down the list and say, this is the cheapest option for one, two, three, four, all the different locations, right?
Right.
Not the best. So I've got
Race to the bottom.
partners that are developing AI tools that will keep a performance scorecard, right? Their uptime, their availability, all those things, and give them scorecards and say, here's your score for all these different metrics. And then we're going to come up with a composite score based upon their price and saying, this is probably the best option for you. So that's one really interesting use for AI that you just don't see out there in the marketplace. From a security standpoint, AI is probably changing more. I think from a social engineering standpoint, is probably where you're finding most of the risk out there. Obviously, I'm not the security expert, but I could tell you that it's mostly in social engineering is where I've seen it today. But it's going to continue to evolve, and we've got to be prepared for it. So I'd say that one of the biggest changes we've seen out there, and this is pretty basic, but it's simply people moving more things to the cloud. And AI is obviously a big driver of cloud because guess what? Bulk of your AI applications are hosted on the hyperscalers. That migration to the cloud, in most cases, they create a couple things. One is they create a need for elite level talent, right? That talent you need to manage those environments is very expensive, and so there are resources out there that you could outsource that capability to. Number two is that the migration to the cloud can create a crazy amount of expense for companies, right? Expenses that you would never imagine, that they just escalate and escalate. But if you have the right team supporting you, you can optimize that cloud environment to help lower your cost structure and make sure that you maintain that cost containment of, I mean, it's probably about 30% or so is what you look at from a savings perspective with through cloud optimization. So that's a big driver, I'd say, of expenditures and also part of that change.
Something you said, Daniel, as a follow up, yeah, it made me think of this is so large costs, but I maybe got a hint of unexpected costs, which are maybe even worse in many ways for a business. Do you see unexpected costs by doing the IT network infrastructure poorly? Does that ever hit brands unexpectedly because of something they didn't think of?
Yeah, there'd be a long list of items that were unexpected, and from IT leaders. I would say that one of the biggest gotchas I see is typically, and I mentioned earlier, is construction. Someone says, "Hey, I want to open up this store," but they don't realize that, "Hey, I am opening up a new coffee shop and it's in the middle of a parking lot and I've got a trench across to the other side." And a lot of times people don't think about this in the contract status, right? When they're going through the contract, like, am I going to get an allowance? Maybe I'll get an allowance for construction. If I commit X amount of locations to you, will you give me an allowance for construction? You know, most people don't negotiate that. Those are things that we look for. That's a big gotcha for sure. I mean, that could be tens of thousands of dollars per location just for that upfront expense, right? And those are things that we help to alleviate.
Thinking about businesses and restaurants, and more in particular, the critical nature of point of sale connectivity, because ringing up transactions, etc., right? How important that is, or even the credit card connectivity for that matter. Where is the reality of the fabled 5 nines? You know, that time that never goes down. And for those that don't know, the nines are really in the dot after the 99, right? It's 5 nines, 4 nines, 3 nines, etc. What availability is out there that is reasonable, makes sense? Because I think 5 nines is more of a myth because what you need for 5 is a cost that many people won't pay.
How about if I give you 6 8s instead? Would that make more sense? No, I
Yeah,
don't know if you can quantify it there. I don't think you can put a specific number. I think if you're running a data center, that's something that
mhm,
you look at, and that's a different level. Ultimately,
right.
you want to know, do you have redundancy built in? Let me start with table stakes. Forget about the metrics. Is your design solid? Do you have redundant gear? Do you have cold spares or hot spares for your environment? Or do you have fuel replacement units nearby, at a local depot so that if something goes wrong on a Monday at 3 o'clock, you don't have to wait for 2 days to get the FedEx out there? Those are important things that you have to consider, right? And a lot of times you'll find in the franchise environment, sometimes people don't always want to pay for redundancy. But when you think about just you know less than $100 for solid redundancy, and you think about how much money you'd lose if you're down just even for an hour. I mean,
Right.
it pays for itself. It pays for itself. That's pretty
And is
critical.
that
Yeah.
the redundancies all is it mostly cellular backup, or is just another kicking over to a different system?
Well, it's having redundancy on multiple components of your business, right? So it's hardware, it's connectivity, and it could be, I've had some customers in the past that historically they would only just work on, hey, let's figure out this primary access and let's just do Wi-Fi. But they realize their LTE is not good enough to run their business, right? Yeah, everybody can hobble along on LTE, but it's not always enough. And when you think about how much more reliant we're becoming on the internet, I mean, look at restaurants, right? Restaurants alone, all the very, very SaaS heavy environment, right?
Yep.
Those are that connectivity and that availability is all the more important than ever, right? You've got third party online ordering was at 30-40% of revenue nowadays. What happens if you lose that connectivity to that store? You can't take orders. You could queue your transactions on your POS, but you're kind of dead in the water on third party ordering. There's some aggregators that will pull some of that, but how long does that function before you start impacting the customer experience?
Well,
I think
it's
that
funny. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
no, I was just going to say that I think that like today, the customer experience is all about technology coupled with the culture of the business, right? That's really what the customer experience is all about. And you got to make that work.
Well, that's what kicked off my head because before we hopped on, you shared with us that you're a parent. You know, you're a dad. Chad's a dad. I'm a
Mhm.
dad. And the dependency on connectivity is greater than ever. And I just started smiling because in our house, we do what I call snorkel parenting. I don't know if you do the same or at that point in your journey yet, right? And so what I mean by snorkel parenting is everything of fun for the most part and connection to the outside world and streaming, everything comes in through that one narrow pipe. And let's assume that is the snorkel.
Okay.
And when chores in the Beck household need to be done and they haven't been done, I put my thumb on the snorkel. We don't resort to corporal punishment. We simply wait for them to pop up asking for oxygen. You know what's down? Absolutely. You know, the lawn's not mowed? I'll be right back.
It's
Snorkel
a lot
parenting.
harder to do when kids have cell phones
Yeah,
because
well, that's a whole different thing. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I've always thought that was interesting. Sorry, just this little side journey there because there's such a dependency on everything that comes in the building and that building that all that coming in through that one pipe in most cases, right?
I'll tell you another quick anecdote of my oldest daughter when she was in high school. I thought it was really cool because I figured out how to go on my firewall and create like filters for all the websites she liked to go onto. Like you can't go on that. Well,
Yeah.
kids are smart, and she found spoofing, so she can go out and use third party sites and go around my firewall. I was like, damn it,
Wow.
unless you shut it all the way off, it's pretty damn hard.
She's
Yep.
going to join you in the business someday, is what I'm hearing.
It sounds like she's gonna give him the business someday. Thanks for that. So Well, you're doing something interesting here, and you have a passion for this, and it sounds like you generally want to help people avoid some of these pitfalls that they're gonna they're gonna invariably hit if they're just wandering around the wilderness and tripping over what they might be able to find in front of them, right? And you'd shared pretty specifically that there's a really heavy consulting piece to this that you're bringing them in, you're trying to understand what they're working for, and then you're gonna find the best fit. And I love that because fit is something I think that is elusive. It's like, "Here, let's sell you some stuff because it's the most I can sell it to you for," or whatever the case may be. So thinking about fit, what are the well, if I'm an SMB or I'm a private owner, I'm a single unit operator because those are the people that I care about them a little bit more because that's families that depend on this business, right? And so how do you help them find the right fit for themselves? Like, and you even tuned it when I said 5 nines, like, yeah, but you should really just think about the redundancy. And I love that you have an idea of making sure it is the right fit. I mean, give me some examples maybe, or tell us about some examples of, we don't need to over engineer anything. What are the things you really need to get going? What are the things that fit that model for you?
I think when you're looking at companies that are still growing, maybe they don't have the same resources of the big dogs out there, you kind of try to figure out what their limitations are and what their tolerance is, right? Like what are you willing to tolerate? Because what you tolerate is what you're going to get, right? And then you look at from a cost perspective and timing, like it could be resources, right? Internal resources. What are you willing to utilize? And then we use that to kind of figure out what that solution looks like. I mean, that's part of the discovery process, right? What are our
Yeah.
limitations? What are our limitations and what are you trying to accomplish? And putting that, I put myself in the customer's shoes, put myself in their shoes as if I am in their role. And frankly, I kind of am in that instance, right? Because I become an extension of that team. I then say, hey, I'm a free resource that now I'm a part of your team and it's my job to figure out what makes the most sense for this company. And I go out and do that. It doesn't matter what size business you are. It could be 5 locations or 100 or 1,000 or 10,000. It's all the same. We take a look at it and we treat everybody with respect and with a lot of thought.
That was another thing that stood out to me in our first conversation, Daniel, is, if you're a single location restaurant like Michael's referencing, whoever you work with is going to be like, well, we can and or can't, and this is how we would take care of you. But if you're a brand with multiple locations, you might have different considerations for each of those location, by region, et cetera. And you have the flexibility to take that into account. I just as a segue to this question, which is, I know everybody needs network connectivity. Everyone needs network security. Who do you help the most? What are some of the markers of like, as soon as you find out, it's like, man, boy, can I help them?
I think that there are, man, that's a tough question. I think it's really understanding the environment. Like you see certain vendors or certain people that are supporting a company, right? And you know that there's a lot of limitations in their capabilities, right? Their tool belt is clearly missing some really important tools in order to support the account like they need to. And the buyer or the user of the service may have no idea because you just don't know how bad you have it until you have something new. If that makes any sense sometimes. And I think it's identifying the support model and what they have today, and that sometimes kind of creates those instances. Like, did you know you can do this too? Did you know that there's an easier way? Did you know that there's other resources? And sometimes we just kind of tolerate what's there because it's. I mean, let's be honest. Sometimes it's painful to change. Sometimes people don't always want to change. They want to stick to what they've got already because it's good enough. But good enough's not
Yeah.
always good enough.
Increasingly so.
Through the work you're doing with your clients, in that process of let's uncover all the things you have in place. Maybe there's some legacy stuff that's been there for a while that they just cut checks to. Are there things that you find like, holy crap, they've had this for so long? Or are there any commonalities of subscriptions that have gone too long, or services that they might have in place that may have just not no or no longer relevant, or replaced by something else?
So time is always changing. There's always downward price compression, and things that you may have purchased 2 years ago, are substantially more expensive than the
Yeah.
going rate today. And maybe you don't know, you want to save money. Maybe you're fine with your budget, but you want to modernize your environment. There's some additional sophistication you want to invest in. My job is to figure out, hey, can we get this new investment into someone's infrastructure without having to pay anything more? And by the way, maybe we'll even come up with a better support model that'll make your life easier, right? And so you don't have to worry about these problems. I mean, how often you think about MSPs, right? I think IT leaders everywhere, how many of them are truly proactive, right? Where they're actually opening up tickets on your behalf with zero involvement on your part. You just get alerted, and different MSPs will say, "Well, we'll alert you depending on these different thresholds of pain, or or sometimes you don't want to hear it." Everybody seems to say, "I want one phone number to call." I think that's better to have no phone number to call because you never have to call your provider. I think that's better.
Uh,
No number.
we're coming up on the fall trade show season, right? That's kicking up here. And I know you've talked about some shows that you're really keen on going. If you were to think about the conversations you're looking to have, what is like what kind of who are you looking to spark up a conversation with? Is it the ops folks, IT? Like who's caring here?
I think that it's different business conversations with different individuals. I mean, generally, you're going to find good conversations with CEOs, with CFOs, with COOs, and or VPs of IT, or CIOs. Those people are generally the ones that are involved. But in other cases, I mean, it's the director. Sometimes it's a manager of technology, and they're the ones that are out in the front line and they're dealing with some of this pain that people aren't always aware of, right? I can't tell you how often I have conversations with people and they tell me about what they're experiencing. And most people have no idea of the pain involved, right? And how inefficient sometimes these environments can be. So, that's kind of what I try to strike that out. And really, it's understand what's going on. Like today, I'll say that marketing, CMOs, they're driving a ton of the change now, right? You think about AI and establishing data lakes to gain better insights with your data. It's the marketing officers that are really kind of driving a lot of those decisions nowadays. Huge change. Never used to be that way. At least
That
from
makes
my
sense. As
yeah.
more technology is available that's super powerful at driving the top line and, guest acquisition, being under marketing umbrella, they should have a bigger seat at that table.
So we're getting a little bit close to time here, and this is where we start kind of landing the plane, gliding it in, and we do a little bit more of the fun stuff on the show. I've started collecting some three fun questions to wrap up that give us some insight and just have a little fun with the last part of our conversation here. So let's see how you do. Quick question, should be fun, nothing painful. You can always say pass if you want to. So let's start here. If QNS could design a perfect connected guest experience, right, from check in to check out, what would it look like? And what's one piece of text that has to be in the mix? Ooh,
I don't know if I
is
can
that
answer.
going in the weeds?
I think that's imagination right there. If I were to, the problem is that a lot of times the technology, like if I'm thinking about me, right, what would be really cool? I would love to go show up to a coffee shop and they know I'm coming and they've got my coffee ready.
All
That's
right.
simple. A lot of people would say, that's too intrusive in my environment. Like I don't want my privacy. I don't want people to know about what my drink is, right? So it might not work, but personally, that's kind of what I would love something like that.
So what's that tech stack, guys? We got a geofence, right? It knows what we're coming up to the building.
There's generally going to be an app involved that's going to help.
We have a
Help
loyalty app
stay
in the mix that knows what we like to buy.
Yep. Time
Right.
of day, probably because you're a creature of habit, probably showing up at a certain window. I have
Right.
to go.
So then
I go
there's
to the
probably
gym
a
in the morning, and
forecasting
then go.
mechanism behind that to make sure they have the product to serve me that. Right.
Yeah. But the
That's
problem
actually
is that
that's not that far in the future. That's a couple opt-ins.
yeah, it's probably not that challenging. You could probably even have an
Yeah.
app pop up and say, "Hey, I see that you're approaching this restaurant or this store, and would you like to put your favorite order in?" Just click yes or no. Maybe it's integrated with your CarPlay.
I literally just caught a theme here, Chad. He doesn't want the phone to ring, and he just wants to pick up his food.
You won't even have to talk to somebody. It'll be on a special spot on the counter with his name on it,
All right, we're
already
talking
set.
getting too deep here into my psyche.
Anyways, all right. Number 2. What's the one thing most GMs or operators think they understand about network infrastructure, but hate to tell you, you really don't?
I think that a lot of times it's an assumption of the tools that are helping to support their account. And if you were to scrape, back the varnish of all the stories that people are telling you, generally it's humans that are doing a lot of the work on their side. And it's not technology that's actually doing a lot of the work.
Ooh.
A lot of people that's very, very normal. They throw manpower, instead of technology at problems. Because guess what? When you're working with really big companies, change comes hard, especially
Mm.
when you're talking about technology. How many people are really going to develop these tools that aren't, and that's why, kind of coming back to the MSPs or people that I work with, there's some mid-tier operators that are maybe not gigantic, but they're nimble enough. They're big enough to scale to support needs anywhere, but they're small enough that they're nimble and they can deploy a lot of next gen technology that other people, it's not even on their roadmap yet.
On agile. There's
Yeah,
something to be said about that, right?
absolutely.
Um, so here's the last one. I mean, how long you been doing this now? 25 years, you said?
20 plus now.
All right. So 28 years. Who's got your network Hall of Fame? Like, what's the most outrageous, overloaded, just or beautifully efficient setup you've ever seen? Like it just.
Inefficient?
I mean, it could also be that insane bird's nest, right? But
Good or bad, I
what
guess.
who hits the wall? Who hits the Hall of Fame? And Chad, what's yours? Because I'm sure I got one that I can pop out too. But yeah, what do you got?
I don't have one, so
Oh,
I'll
really?
I'll shoot it over to Daniel.
I can't name names,
Oh,
but I've
no,
seen
no. You please don't name names. That's just more
I,
dubious honor.
I've seen some crazy stuff, from the good and the bad. Mm,
Yeah.
One that was really impressive to me was it was actually a nonprofit, and this CIO had been there for about 20 years or so, but he had he had put together, constructed his own little mini data center in his office, and it was the coolest thing. It was super efficient, and it was in a really small space, and he was somehow able to figure out how to create like a really high end data center in a small area. So he had limited resources, but figured out how to do it, man. And that's just I love the scrappiness, right, of people it put together really good planning on there. And then I have the other side of the equation where, and this is kind of a lesson for people everywhere, right? Sometimes it's better to just do it right the first time. It's in fact, it's not sometimes. It's always best to do it right the first time. But a lot of times people are afraid it's going to cost us a little bit more time or energy up front. Guess what? You have to do it eventually.
Yeah, or what's it gonna cost you when it breaks,
I once
or
worked
even
with a
worse?
company. This was many years ago. This is part of
Yeah.
my age. Who started off and their call center just started growing and growing and growing, and they never modernized their environment. And they end up with a rat's nest of crap in their data center, their call center, because there's just too much. And you just grow, and you grow and you grow, and at some point it is a intolerable environment that you can't deal with anymore. It's too big.
Yeah, or they just build system on top of system like cities on old civilizations, and it's just piled up, right?
Yeah, it only gets worse.
Yeah.
It only gets worse, and that's why it's best to do it right the first time.
Daniel, I think you're an interesting guy. I think I like the idea that one, you took the leap when Chad started talking at the beginning of this episode or the show about being brave. It's 100% true. Like this is a bold move, and we're in the same boat, and salute you, man. That absolutely, this is why we do it too. We love to watch people like you that are brave enough to do it, to pull something together through sheer will.
Yeah.
And it's sheer will, right? It is not happening unless you make it happen, right? To make the company happen and grow, right?
I think that we're very similar in that regard. Trying to do things the right way, and I think we all can give a crap, right? We give a crap, and we those details, all that stuff really matters. And like, I want to put myself in the shoes of the customer, right? It's like
Yeah.
let's do this together. Let's really people throw that partnership term out there all the time, but very few people actually mean it, right? I want to do good. I want to
For
do good in
real
this
on that
world.
one,
I
yeah.
want to do good in this world for the rest of my life. That's my
Yeah,
goal.
I have a feeling if you have a logo on your website, actually, you know who it is and it means something to you.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. It's been great. Every time I talk to you, I come away feeling good. And thank you for being who you are in our conversations we've had. Chad and I've been able to spend time with you. We've also talked about your travel schedule coming up and the events you'll be going to. I think you mentioned, actually, I know you mentioned QSR Evolution Conference that's coming up in Atlanta,
Yeah.
right? In a few short weeks, right? What else are you going to be this year that people can find you, seek you out, and have a conversation? And you're pretty active on LinkedIn. Are you watching that for people that want to have a conversation there? What's the best way to reach out to you?
My email is probably the easiest way. It's Daniel at qnsnow.com, or you can go hit me on my website. You could set up a meeting right there. My calendar, I have a link for my calendar right on there.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Well, everybody, this has been Daniel with QNS, ad entrepreneur and seeker of great connections, both personally and for your business. It's an honor and a pleasure to know you. We are blessed to be able to also do business with you. And something for the people listening on too, I think it's important to know that, while this is our client, this isn't a paid advertisement. And when Chad and I look at the marketplace for what we do as at Ink Tank GTM, we're not just going, who can we get money from? We want to know who's doing good stuff out there that's doing something different, special, and impactful. Otherwise, I hate to tell you, we'd rather wait another minute. Just like you said, would you just have it done now or would you have it done right? We like to partner with people that are doing really interesting stuff that we believe is going to help people and pave the way for other people to grow and succeed and build platforms to develop businesses. Daniel's one of those folks, and honestly, with my heart, I say, yeah, if you have a question, you should call him up. He's a good guy, and at minimum, he'll send you in the right direction. So, Daniel, thank you so much for spending the time with us today, honestly.
Thanks,
Thank
guys.
you.
Appreciate it. Have a great
All
rest of your
day.
day.
Thank you, Daniel.
All right, everybody, this has been Chat GTM. I don't know what episode, but I'm sure our producer will tell us at some point. So thank you for tuning in. And remember, be kind to each other, love on each other. And if you're in service industry, keep doing what you do because you make our world a better place to be. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.